Back to another episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast, the podcast that is passing the ball to the next generation of youth sports coaches and youth sports parents. And hey, athletes, you can listen too. So in our episode today, I interview for the second time Clay Henricksen. Our first interview was a little chopped up by a little technical difficulties, but Clay is a social studies teacher at Huntley High School and also the assistant varsity girls basketball coach. And so in our conversation today, we talk about helping our players make better decisions. We talk about empowering our athletes and also the importance of connections with our players, but also with other coaches. So without further ado, let's dive in. And welcome back to the Bridging Impact Podcast, Clay. For those that are listening, we had some technical difficulties on the first time, but that was our preseason game, and now we are in the regular season for our conversation. So I'm really excited to talk again. So thank you for your time, Clay, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's nice that we kind of got a test run, I guess, but fingers crossed it works out this time.
100%. So let's dive right in. What's your definition of impactful leadership?
Yeah. So obviously I listened to a couple podcasts and you told me about this question beforehand. So my definition is intentional action that leads to the empowerment of others or to better those around you. Because for me, as a coach or a leader, our decisions and our actions should be for the betterment of others, right? And that's what I mean by intentional. It's not sort of willy-nilly just deciding what I'm going to do when I wake up, but it's thinking things through that are going to benefit and help others. And to me, so leadership isn't always the speech that you see in the movies or the, rah-rah kind of, cheerleading a type of leadership. Good leadership in that way almost just is, because it's intentional action on a day-to-day basis. So you might not get noticed, you might not see it, but it does lead to helping others and the empowerment of others.
100%. Yeah. And that intentional action is shown in different ways. You kind of talked about it. Some people are the rah-rah leaders, but there are also, the leaders that are just lead by example and are really quiet and lead from behind. So it's just like the intentional action and the empowerment of others in their own kind of personalities. I'm curious, you've obviously accumulated a lot of this experience and thought around this through your experience as a social studies teacher and now as a basketball coach. What made you want to be, a social studies teacher and a basketball coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of other teachers, they were inspired or influenced by their teacher or, their coach that they had. I had a really, influential coach and teacher in my life, Todd Grunlow, who was my freshman world history teacher, and then he ended up being my varsity basketball coach. So, I built that relationship with him, and he really, in my high school career, he really helped me kind of find myself and empower me to pursue the goals that I wanted, whether it was on the court or off the court. And, so when you have a sort of a mentor, a role model, a friend like that in your life, it's hard not to be influenced by that and want to sort of help others in the same way. I'm forever indebted to the experience he helped me have in high school. And I think it just felt like a natural progression. I love the game. I love coaching. I love teaching. I love the subject matter. So it just felt like sort of a natural thing. And I think it was really solidified in that relationship I've built with him. And then, I could name a number of other coaches, and teachers that I've had in my life that have been really influential. But like most teachers, it really started with, the ones I had and then the influence they had in my life throughout the years of me growing up.
Yeah. So those teachers that you had influenced you and bridged that, impact, so to speak, to you, and now you want to bridge that impact now as a teacher and a coach. And I think that's what it's all about, right? It's like that continuing domino effect of wanting to make a positive impact. And so with that, I'm curious, how you utilize, kind of storytelling and diving into kind of the history side into connecting with your athletes.
Yeah. I think it's, I think if you ask some of my players, they kind of will laugh sometimes because I'll kind of go on these tirades about these very niche things, whether it's history or basketball. And, I think it kind of shares my personality. The nerdy side comes out of me. And I think it's like, I'm not just a coach, right? But also I think that the subject matter itself, history and social studies and, it's all around us. It's connected to, the things that we see and things that kids see on a day-to-day basis. I could connect a lesson of a moral or ethical debate that people were having in the 1550s, and it's similar debates and ethical reasoning that students might be dealing with today. So I think that's, for me, one of the powerful things about history and social studies and geography and all that kind of stuff. It's really it can be a bridge from the past to the present. It can be a bridge from the things around you to your own experience. So I think having some knowledge in that, and then, as a teacher, having to sort of craft that narrative allows me to then see connections I can make with kids and with our athletes and with our students on a day-to-day basis. And it's a powerful sort of framework to kind of go from, I guess. And I think one of the things I mentioned last time when we tried this the first time was that history really is just the story of the human experience. Much of the emotions and the feelings and the thought process of people, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, like, we can connect those to the same sort of motivations and feelings and emotions of our students and of our athletes now. So if I can leverage that history to make connections in the present and have students understand and think about their own situation in a historical context, and the experience they've had, I think that's really, really powerful.
100%. And I think that's something that we forget often as humans, especially now, because we're so connected via technology, is that it's like the 70s and the 60s, and they just feel so far removed because it feels like, they were not nearly as civilized because they didn't have a cell phone. And so I'm actually curious, talking about kind of the story of the human experience, I'm curious for you as a coach, what has been the biggest shift from pre-pandemic connecting? Because that experience of being a kid was, I feel like, a lot different before the pandemic to now after the pandemic, especially because you're working with high school students who are, they're pretty tapped into the phone and technology by that point in their lives.
Yeah. I think, if you think about that experience, you want to say it's sort of a once in a lifetime, a once in a generational experience, hopefully, right? Hopefully that's their once in a lifetime experience. But I kind of connect it back to, with education or with teaching. And this sort of solidified my beliefs after the pandemic, that you want to think of your students as a person first, right? You want to think of them as individuals first, because we can all think back to the last 2 years of just the different ways that the pandemic impacted us, the struggles that we all had, and we all had them, right? We kind of had a shared experience, but at the same time, it was very isolating, right? So if we, as coaches and as teachers, can understand that, we had those struggles, and you think of your players or our players, our students as persons first, it just comes from a different lens. You want to make connection to that person, and that's going to be a much more powerful impact in terms of then, the relationship you're building, because those relationships should be beyond just the court, right? I mean, that's the true testament of coaching and teaching. And so I think the pandemic really reiterated that for me, was that, we have to make sure that we're thinking them as person first, right? Not just basketball player first, right? Or student first. They're person first, and they have their needs and their desires just like any of us. And then you come from that place, it can kind of really, sort of change the dynamic on how you might, have a conversation or connect with them.
Right. And I feel like for seeing the person first, it's so often that, I'm kind of thinking as I hear you talk, the greatest coaches and the greatest leaders, they reach out to, their athletes or their students, later on. And that shows that they really care. And it's not transactional. It's about transforming, the athletes and students' lives throughout. I'm curious how you, take time in your classroom. Of course, there's those little interactions, but if you help students help see each other as people first as well, because I think sometimes, I even think back to when I was a player and I had a lot more, different old school coaches. I just saw my coach as a coach, and it didn't see until after. And it's a similar thing with parents too. I didn't see my coach after as a human until I started connecting with them post grad. I'm just curious if there's any, kind of activities or specific programming you all have to help your athletes see each other as humans first as well.
We do. We try and do a number of things, so one of the things that is kind of important for us is building a community beyond just say our varsity team. We try and build a community beyond that. So, like we have a feeder program where girls can participate and play with each other from 5th grade until they reach high school. We as high school coaches then are able to connect with them, coach them, in the spring season and our off season in a feeder league that we have here. So we kind of started early there, and then when you get to high school, we make sure we really craft time to, I like Pop uses the term break bread. We really make an effort to do things like break bread. The beginning of the year, we have a giant pizza party for our entire team. Halfway through the year, we'll have, we do like a bowling and pizza night, with laser tag. We're really lucky that we have some great parents that will host, dinners at their house, and, we do simple things like, dress up days for practice, team practices, and then you get to see what kids wear and their personalities come out a little bit more there, so we try and carve out opportunities, during the season, before they ever get to high school to make connections with each other. And it's really, you can really see it, you can tell the bond and the connections that they have because you've known now these kids since they're in 5th grade. The girls that play with each other have known each other since 5th, 6th grade, and then we even try and extend that beyond. We had an alumni game pre-pandemic. We're hoping to bring that back where then we invite all of our alumni back and celebrate them and get some officials and see who can still lace it up, 5, 10, 12 years after they last played a high school game. So we really try and carve out opportunities, and then after that, we'll break bread with all the alumni. We'll go out and have, some food with each other and all that kind of stuff. So we really try and, like I said, carve opportunities that, just give kids an opportunity and our student athletes an opportunity just to be together in a non-basketball setting, and we try and be there as coaches as much as we can. I also understand, they need that time away from us as well, but we want to carve those opportunities with them too. So yeah, we try and do a lot of things, beyond just the season, but, starting in 5th grade all the way through, you're an alumni to build that community and see each other as, sort of, friends as a part of this.
100%. Yeah. And I'm kind of thinking, right, like I think those connections at a younger age, because the transfer portal is such a big thing. Like it's even a big thing in high school now. And I'm not sure what it's like in your area, but now I'm here in Los Angeles and at Venice, we have at least 3 or 4 guys on our varsity team that have transferred in. And LA is just, there's not a lot of, at least from my understanding, I'm still very new here, so I could be wrong, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of feeder programs and like connections. But I can imagine for your, your high school, like that's something that's really like helps people stay. Because when I was playing, I didn't even think about transferring. All I wanted to be is I was connected, I was tied in with my friends, and I could have probably got more playtime elsewhere. But I think there's more to the high school experience than just athletics.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for us, that hasn't really impacted our area here, the northwest suburbs of Chicago. So, you hear of guys here and there or some girls here and there, but, fortunately for our program, maybe that's a testament to, our feeder program and the work that, guys like, Nick Andrea for us who have done, so it hasn't impacted us yet, but I would be interested to see if that does continue to grow, and kind of make its way out, because every kind of comes top down, right? You see it in college and then it kind of hits high school later. So we've been fortunate that I think, there's a community feel here.
Yeah, shifting gears, I think one of the big reasons that players do want to, transfer, obviously they want their minutes, but they want to be empowered. And I know that's a big thing that's really important to you and your program. So, if you could share a little bit more about, how you implement player empowerment in your program.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of back to my definition at the beginning. At the end of the day, you want your players to feel confident, and they want to feel the confidence of, you as a coach, right? I mean, so I think for me, I've also shifted in ensuring that I'm looking at our student athletes as person first. I also try and assume positive intentions about our players, right? You can think to the number of coaches that you've had over the years, maybe, or other coaches that, like they don't think they think their athletes are like losing the game on purpose, right? I try and assume positive intentions about our student athletes and about our players because, I know they want to win. I know they're working hard. And when you can kind of come from that place, the conversations about how or what is different, right? So I hope that our athletes understand that. Like, I assume that they're doing well, so that always gets you to a positive start. And then the conversations that we have are about empowering them to make the decisions as a result of assuming their intentions are positive, right? I don't think we have any players that don't want to win or don't want to dribble or don't want to pass. Like, then our conversations can be very like, okay, let's talk about this decision, or let's talk about, what can you do to get better, and what can I do to help you get better? Because I'm assuming that that's what you want, right? And that's the coaching that you want to receive. So I think it starts there for me, assuming, like I said, assuming positive intentions of our athletes, and then that allows me to have those conversations about how can we make you better, and or how can we make you better, which makes all of us better. And then that's my role. And I hope that they know that comes from a place of confidence.
And I like that you talk about it comes from a place of assuming positive intention, because one thing, like, I'm on the boys' side, and a lot of times younger boys that struggle with moving the ball and understanding flow of a game, they just want to pick the ball up and rip and go straight to the basket, you know. And sometimes I'm like, what are you doing, right? Because, like, instinctually, I've been playing basketball, right, for quite a bit of time. I understand flow. I understand, kind of drive and kick, and then, you don't always have to drive, but to them, they want to win, they want to score, and so that's their positive intention. And so that's actually kind of a cool realization I'm having for myself right now. And so with that, I also like the side of things. You're empowering to make decisions, and I think that's the big thing. And I remember that's a big thing that we discussed earlier, on podcast number 1, is that a lot of times coaches, they'll run drills and different things that don't really allow for that decision-making process, that mistakes. And so I'd love for you to share that story around, the shot that sealed the regional for you all.
Yeah. So to go a little bit back, I was, we've really made a shift in sort of how we coach and how we practice. That a lot of almost, I would say, I don't know, if I were to put a number, 80 to 90% of our practice activities or practice drill have a decision-making component, a small-sided game component, a winner, a loser, a competitive, and we kind of change time, score, space available, number of players, but almost everything we do has decision-making in it, right? And we want players to make decisions in practice, and empowering them to make those decisions, and learn through that in practice. So one of the ways that we do that is the way that we talk about, open shots, right? We use the term ROB, which is, it's not one that I made up. It's not one that's like specific to our program, but it's if you are in your range, if you're open and you're on balance, like, shoot the ball, right? And so we don't have conversations, or this past year, we didn't have any conversations about, like, you took a bad shot, I'm taking out because you had a bad shot. It was, okay, that last shot you took, were you in your range? Yes. Were you open? Yes. Were you balanced? Yes. Okay, awesome. I'm really happy that you took that shot, right? And so you're coaching the decision, and you're coaching that part of the decision making, and you're empowering your players to be, ready when they're in their range, when they're open, they're on balance, and not talking about, like, not shooting, not like, so they understand that we're giving them the confidence. If they're making the decision and they're ready to do it, like, we want you to knock that down. Like, we want you to shoot that. And I think shooting is a really easy area to talk about giving players confidence, because it's, when you start missing, it's really easy to lose confidence. You miss a couple in a row and you're starting to think, overthink in your head. We want to eliminate that. Like, you missed 3 in a row, but, like, they were great shots. Like, awesome. Right. So this comes back to this story where, I had a lot of conversations with one of our now seniors about, she's a phenomenal shooter. I mean, she's a great shooter. She made a couple this past year from, NCAA 3-point line, like, she's just extended her range throughout the year. And I had a number of conversations with her, and I never once did we talk about her having a bad shot. I just said, was it a Rob shot? And then there'd be times I just looked at her and I just say, Rob, right? Like, because that was our terminology, right? And she knew that's meant that, we supported her in the decision to shoot it. So come regional time, these are conversations we've had through the whole year and things we've worked on through the whole year. Just under 4 minutes to go, I think we're up about 8 or so, and one of our best players just goes down hurt. Right, we're in transition, we're driving, we kick. This girl, she relocates out to the wing. It's a one more from the corner to the wing, and without hesitation, she steps up. It's a rob shot and just buries it. I mean, and you could see on the sideline, our head coach on film was kind of like, and she, I mean, it was just pure, absolutely pure. And you can just see in the background, the other team just deflated, just kind of like threw up their shoulders. And it was out of a transition opportunity that, I think a lot of coaches maybe would have, been upset or angry or, like, what the heck are you doing? And essentially, we didn't know it now, but that essentially, sealed the regional championship after that. There wasn't any coming back from who we were playing at that point. So it was just sort of a testament to, like, to see one of our players just like in the biggest moments of one of the biggest games of the year, just step up and knock that down, after hours of practice and conversations. And it was just awesome to see, because those things come to fruition as a coach. You get about maybe 2 to 3 seconds of gratitude for, 3 to 4 months of, preparation and work, from your, planning to helping players to, them putting in the work and putting themselves in a position to be successful. So that was just awesome to see. And that's where we try and coach from a place like that.
Yeah, it's a testament to the process, right? Like, I think we all want those outcomes immediately, right? And I really like the Rob. I have heard something similar, like with 3 R's, but just like understanding that that's a good shot. And I know for me as a shooter, I still play, right? I still play pickup. And I honestly, I've have like the past 3 times I've played, I haven't shot very well, but I've been open, right? I've been on balance, and like, I just like next shots going in. And that's what we have to instill into our athletes as well. And it's over and over and over again. Yeah. And so, and then in those moments where she just like, she shot it, she didn't even think about it. Cause that's a big thing about like the mental side and the mental performance. Cause I actually, as I'm sure athletes, basketball players, like, we've all been in our own heads and can be our own worst enemies. And once you're in your head, like, you kill your flow, you kill your ability to like make good decisions, because decisions have to be made quick. Right. And so if you're thinking about a decision, it's probably going to be too late to make. So it's all about that empowerment. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what we really try and do in practice, put them and give them opportunities to make those decisions in practice, and have them sort of I heard this on, I think it was on the basketball podcast. You want them to make the right mistake, so you have to then give your players opportunities in practice to make those right mistakes, those decisions, and then you can talk through those things. And I think sometimes, like, I think it's really important from a practice, that process, right? That the decision making, the empowerment, that happens every day in the things that you do. It's not a once in a while I'm going to talk about one thing. It's a commitment to empowering and developing your players, because you want to coach them to where they can be and not where they're at right now. Your team and your players will sort of tell you what they need, but you have to put them in a position to show what they need first. And so I say that because that's been a big shift for us in moving to small-sided games, and not a lot of 1-on-0, 2-on-0, 3-on-0. It's a lot of, we're going to build a 1-on-1 into a 3-on-3, and maybe in the 3-on-3, we have an advantage given to the offensive team, and then they get an 8-second shot clock after the first pass. Like those sorts of things that can foster decision-making without overcomplicating it, but then it allows and empowers players to make decisions and then sort of self-organize. Some of the best things I've seen is that, one of our seniors in our open gym, we're playing 5-on-5, and they're talking to, some of our underclassmen about the things that we like to do in terms of decision making. Like, that's really cool to see, and that's really awesome to just hear those conversations, so that's just it's really near and dear to my heart, because I also think it's fun, right? And like, kids want to play, like, that's why they play basketball. They want to play the game, and we got to give them the opportunity to play and make those mistakes so that they can learn from them.
Right. They don't want to go through practice running the same motions, same, shell defense the entire time. They want to be able to like get in and live. And I think that's something that I've been learning, and I learned from great Don Showalter when he's on my podcast, talking about similar things where you're structuring little games around what you want to work on, around the objectives, instead of, because if you just play 5-on-5 willy nilly, right? Like I think that sometimes gets out of hand, and it's like just becomes pickup basketball. But if you structure it around, a little 3-on-3, a little 4-on-4 with some rules, you are able to help and aid that decision making process.
Yeah, and not that there's anything wrong with 5-on-5, but you, like you said, you want some structure to it, right? Like you don't want it to just be pick up ball at practice. So that's been a huge shift for us. And after I tell that story, going back to that, our girls made, each of us, we have 3 varsity, I'm an assistant varsity, we have another assistant varsity, and then our head coach, they each made us sort of like bracelets, like little bracelets with acronyms on it, and they made mine with the acronym ROB. So that's also like I know that it like kind of, maybe I've said it too much, that it's sunk in enough that I get a little bracelet with the acronym on it.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, honestly, if you're not saying it, like if you're not annoyed of yourself saying it over and over again, I don't know if they're going to listen, because that's part of the thing is like you plant the seed. The term rob, right, is the the seed, and then every day of you saying it is like watering, and then those shots end up becoming the garden, so to speak. And I think that's just so much wisdom there for coaches. And what's the biggest shift that you have had from being a coach to where you are now, from where you first started?
Yeah, I think I've alluded to it a little bit, and just I think one, I personally have really fallen in love with the process. I think when we first get into it as coaches, we want to win games, and we want to, carry the trophies, and we want to, like get the accolades. I think there's a little bit as a younger coach, and that's a part of it, right? You want to get the recognition, but I think the biggest shift for me is one, I've really fallen in love with the practice and the process of it. I've fallen in love with learning about the game and how to teach it. And as a result, that's sort of led me to this point of, coaching, decision making, and putting players in positions where I'm not the one at the focal point, right? You had Chris Oliver right on your podcast. I listened to that one. And, one of the things I heard from him is he's like, you don't want your practice to be a coaching clinic. And that really resonated with me. I think that's a big shift, that if you were to walk into any one of our practices or to our practices, I would hope that you wouldn't hear us a whole lot as coaches, and that's been a big shift, that the practice and the process is really player centered and player first, and that's reflective in the things that we do, where we can create situations where, they're at the center of it, and their development is at the center of it, so that's been a big shift, because, I think previously, like, I kind of like, we kind of falter back to that kind of, like you mentioned it, the old school kind of like, my way or the highway deal, and I would say, like, I've kind of done a 180 from that, at the start of my coaching career to where I'm at now.
Yeah, and I had a few podcasts ago, my JV basketball coach, Isaac Gilday, was talking about, when you're an athlete, you have kind of a little bit of an ego around you, right? Like it's, I'm getting buckets and all of this and all that. And so when you're a younger coach, you kind of bring that like athlete edge, and you're talking about like, we're going to win some championships, like I'm going to really guide them. And, you end up kind of, being the show instead of like orchestrating the show, so to speak. And I think that's kind of an interesting point that you bring up, that like if you are talking for there are going to be practices where you probably preseason where you're teaching your offenses, and there will probably be more times, but like as the season goes on, if you are consistently the one talking the most, and as I hear you're talking about when you ask questions to your, you ask questions instead of always telling them the answers. And as a teacher, how has being a teacher, a social studies teacher, helped you actually as a basketball coach?
Yeah, I mean, it's tremendous, because, I think it really allows me a better perspective. I think a lot of times, there's nothing wrong with it. There's a lot of basketball coaches who only know basketball, and that's great, because it's a wealth of knowledge, and it's this background of these great experiences in basketball. But as a teacher, it is building relationships, it is just the skills of working with others. And as a teacher, you have to try and think of your students in the same. And I think one of the things that teaching has allowed me to do is that, in teaching, you have to think about how you're going to differentiate what you're teaching for the ability of your students, right? It's not possible every single lesson to have a different worksheet for every single student. That's not possible. But you really have to be intentional, like, going back to my definition, intentional about the decisions you make. One, because teachers, you don't have a lot of time to make a whole ton of decisions, in terms of planning, but you have to be really intentional in creating things that lead to the outcomes that are going to lead to student success. And I think that idea and that mentality has really transferred to, my coaching, because, as a coach, you might get, let's say in preseason, you get 10 to 12 2-hour practices. I mean, that's not a lot of time, right? So you have to really be intentional and thoughtful in what you're doing that's going to best benefit the players that you have and fit the system to the players that you have. So that's the same of the decisions you have to make in education. You have to take all these factors into play into that, learning abilities, playing styles, all that kind of stuff. So those skills, I think, transfer from the classroom as an educator to the floor, and it's made me a better coach as a result of having to make those decisions and thinking about planning intentionally.
Right. And as I hear you kind of talking about this, I think about, of course, the intentionality of it. But when I was learning as a young coach, and I still am, but if you choose to do X drill, you can't do Z drill, because you can't do 2 drills at the same time, right? I'm sure if there's a history lesson, if you teach, this year of history, you can't, or you have less time to teach this year of history. So it's kind of an interesting little, and one of my favorite high school teachers was a history teacher as well. And he actually taught, like when we were going through the civil rights era, he taught about, Negro League baseball. And so that really resonated with me. Right. And that was probably intentional of him, knowing he had athletes in the class to, connect with. And so I'm curious what your process is around, like, how do you, reflect and coach, player A different than player B?
Yeah, I think, this has been great, so, I work under Steve Rates, is, approaching 400 wins, multiple regional titles, sectional, state trips. So I'll say this, I'm very fortunate to work under the head coach that I work under, and he's empowered me to do things like this, so big credit to Steve. But one thing that I learned from him really quickly is that every player has the same expectation, the same standard, the same expectation of hard work. Like there are just program pillars that every player is expected of, and in our program, it's the, give your best effort every day. It's the communicate, like those things don't change, but how you approach a player and how they need to be coached can be different. So I think for us that also, connecting back to empowerment, it's your conversations you have a foundation or pillars that you can go to, but the way that you approach them or talk them or put them in certain situations is dependent on the person and the player themselves. You got to learn how they're going to respond, but at the end of the day, you still have the same expectation. Like we have the same expectation 1 through 15. If we have 15 varsity players or what, any given year it's a different number. That expectation doesn't change, but I might not coach them the same way, if that makes sense. And then that allows us, and again, I learned this from Steve, to then find those different ways to empower them in different ways. Some ways I might send some players, like I'll send some clips after the games and, hey, like, look at these 3 things you did really well. Send them a little message. The next morning it might just be like asking questions, away from, because I know they don't want to maybe talk in front of the whole group. Hey, what are 2 things that you did well yesterday? Or like just seeing them in the hallway, giving them a high five and just be like, I'm really proud of you for what you did yesterday. But understanding that the expectations are the same, and that we're going to hold you accountable at the same level as anybody else, but that doesn't mean I'm going to coach you exactly the same way. And that was a really important lesson I learned from Steve, and something he just does a phenomenal job. We had, to kind of tell another story, we had our assistant coach, her and her sister were 2 players in our program that were just one of the best players we've ever had, and her sister was the all-time leading scorer in McHenry County. And he knew that he could really get, kind of push her, which would push everybody else. But he wouldn't coach her the same way in terms of how he would, kind of push her when needed and how she would respond. And that lesson was that he coached arguably the best player in the county, the same as everybody else, right, but at the same time in a different way. So that's something that I think is really, really has been a lesson that's been really important in my growth as a coach.
No, 100%. I think I like that you're talking about, like, we all have the same standards, same expectations, but how we get to those standards and expectations will vary based on our individual personalities and honestly, just how we communicate and go about our lives and our own individual goals. But those are our standards. Every day we're going to be at our best. And so that's just how to accomplish something as a team is recognizing individuality and coming together for the greater mission and purpose of the team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been just a staple of our program and something that has just allowed us sort of success, and it has allowed us sort of sustained success too. We've had our ups and downs, but over the last 10 to 15 years, it's really allowed for us to have some great success.
Yeah, 100%. And I know that you are big on, obviously we've talked about it, building relationships and empowering athletes, but I know that, from our previous conversations, we've talked about the importance of just like building connections with other coaches. Can you, share a little bit more about your journey with that and how that's helped you in your development as a coach?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I've been very fortunate to work under Steve, who has really empowered me to do these things. And so there's been a couple of ways, I think social media can be a great tool. I know everybody is really sometimes down on that. There's obviously some negatives, but if used correctly, it can be a great tool. So to share a little story, I guess, about my own experiences in the area, there's a player development coach. His name's Zach Foster, who, he's worked with NBA guys. He's spent time working with Kobe. Before he passed away, and Gigi, and so he's really well known, really well respected. He actually went to the high school that I now teach and coach at. So I had known him, I had played against him, and when the pandemic had started, high school sports had shut down, right? So he was looking for some help, so I reached out to him and I said, "Hey man, can I help out?" As a result, I built a connection and a network where next thing I know, I was helping him with guys from high school to high level NCAA to overseas pros, to guys who are playing in the NBA. And that experience building a network and just building a connection was from a place of not wanting anything in return, just wanting to be in the gym, wanting to be helping, wanting to be around the game and learn. And as a result, I've had these awesome experiences helping him and helping other guys, and then helping, some other player development coaches with other guys, so it's been it's really important, I think, in doing that, because, you can find any number of basketball guys that want to talk the game, and if you can kind of come from that place, that's how we end up, having a podcast right now. And what you're trying to do with your podcast, it's so powerful because it leads to shared knowledge. It leads to shared experiences. It helps you build a network of people you can rely on and trust in your growth, because you can't do it alone, and so I've been fortunate as a result to be able to reach out to some guys. I reached out to a player development coach at the Sky, Byron, and he was able to get some of our girls into some runs with some other girls. Just like those things create opportunities for others, and they help you be better, and they help you sort of like, I don't know, grow as a coach, but then you can help others at the same time. And I think it's important if you come from a place of I don't expect anything in return. That becomes more fruitful, in the long run, because you're there to just help. And I didn't expect anything in return, and I still don't. I'm just very thankful for the, as a result, the experiences I've had with any number of things that I've done over the last, 10, 12 years as a coach.
Right. And I love that you talk about kind of networking, so to speak, in terms of what can I do for you instead of what can you do for me? Because I think that's a big shift that, I've had. And I also just think in general, when people think about networking, they think about, giving a business card and asking for something, right? But you're talking about, hey, how can I serve right? And those networking opportunities of meeting other people and serving, number one, is obviously helping you, become a better coach by working with, high level talented athletes that raise your bar as a coach. But it's also helping the girls out in terms of like, oh, they have other teams that they can go and play against. So it's like when you're connecting and collaborating with other people, again, like you talked about, like you can't do it alone, especially coaching. But in my opinion, like I feel like most jobs, like we don't even have to talk about like, sports specifically, teaching, coaching, like it's a team effort.
Yeah.
And that's something that is so wonderful about, basketball and team sports that teaches us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a thing that you can, you can translate to any job or anything in your life. And I would say networking isn't easy. It's hard to put yourself out there. What you're doing is networking and connecting, and it's not easy to do, so I understand why people might be hesitant, but it can lead to some really awesome and really cool things. And at the end of the day, wherever it takes me, this coaching thing, whether it's talking to you or reaching out to other coaches, or I may never move beyond this position, but you know what, at the end of the day, I hope that I serve others. I hope that I can empower and better others. And I hope that, it's going to be a fruitful experience for everybody at the end of the day.
1,000%. I know for a fact, and I try and say this on almost every podcast, is like I become, one of the reasons that I do this podcast is also for myself to become a better coach. Like every time, like a lot of times I think similar things of what you said, but the way that the stories that you weave in and the way you put it, like makes me understand things to another level and helps me be a better coach and a teacher for the kids. And so I noticed that I've become a significantly better coach as soon as I started this podcast, just from having these conversations and sharing stories and, and being able to connect. So I again, as we kind of wrap up into our last little segment here, like what are your final words of advice for the newer coaches and also, the youth sports parents that are listening to this as well?
Yeah. I think, it connects back to that, sort of that networking, building some networks with coaches and other people. It's, I would say it's a commitment to being a lifelong learner. In education, that's a term that's thrown around a lot. You want to help develop and create lifelong learners, but I truly believe that. I think the pandemic really, when it got taken away from all of us, so to speak, it really thrust me into like, I want to learn as much as I can. I want to reach out to people. Like, I want to be a better coach, and because I missed the game, but it made me realize how much I loved it at the same time. And your passion and loves can only take you so far, but if you commit to being a lifelong learner, like, I don't think you can go wrong. I tell students that they come up sometimes, they're like, when am I going to need to know this? Like, I don't need to do math forever. And I kind of just pose the question to them. I go, when is learning more ever going to be harmful to you? I get the stressors of school, I get all that stuff, but learning more is never going to be a detriment to your long-term growth, and in the same fashion, I sort of pose questions to them. Well, tell me where you're going to be in 10 years. And they're like, well, I don't know. It's like, well, then how do you know what you need to know? Because the more you learn, and the commitment to lifelong learning is so it can lead you to all these different places and all these different things that you could do. And it brings a joy that, if you're committed to learning and growing and being, sort of selfless in the process, that long-term, satisfaction really is there, and you're only going to be better for it. So, a commitment to lifelong learning and self-improvement, I would say, is probably the biggest piece of advice.
100%. And I think that's a really interesting point that you make, asking them about the 10 years, because that's something that I've been really realizing and trying to preach recently is like every life experience builds for the next, right? And so maybe it's not math, but it's your for me, like, I think I went to University of Oregon. Obviously, I'm a big Ducks fan, right? And I think the biggest thing that I learned is writing and my writing skills with my major. And so now I write a lot and I create a lot of content. And so that experience went on to the next, where sometimes in college I was like, oh my God, when am I going to use this? When am I going to do this? It's all theory, but it ends up building on itself. So I think that's a really good point. Where can people find and connect with you if they want to, continue the conversation? And what other resources would you share with the listeners?
Yeah. So to your point about sort of building, taking that next steps, I've started to sort of network more on Twitter at Clay Henricksen. That sort of started as a teacher account, but I've kind of networked into, meeting you, for example, on that and basketball. So yeah, at Clay Henricksen. And then some of those decision-making drills, activities that we talked about, we started to make a bank on YouTube for our program. So our lower levels, our feeder program that we talked about, can utilize those as resources. So on YouTube, if you want to check out some of the stuff that we do or the stuff that I have done and we have done as a program, it's just Clay Henricksen on YouTube. Those would probably be the two best places to find me, I guess.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you for not doing one, but two podcasts. Yeah. This one worked. This one will go out to the people. We didn't have any technical issues. I'm excited to release it. Thanks, Clay.
Yeah, I'm so happy. I appreciate, like I said, you having me on. It was fun to talk twice. And, just thanks for the work that you're doing. And, like the name of it, bridging that impact for coaches and connecting that, connecting all of us together. So appreciate what you do. And thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. We'd love it if you would like, subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts. And this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself, so we can have this dialogue and move forward, make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.